The thing for me is anytime we find a safe, a
He
locked
likes the
safe is
safes.
kind of, I mean,
Yeah.
that's like my nemesis.
But there's
Go
never
after 'em.
anything in them.
Yeah,
You know, it's really rare. It's always like a paper clip and a rubber band.
We had a secondhand store because, well, okay, going back. We had a mortgage company, and it was around 2000.
For years, fans only heard one side of what actually happened between Jarrod Schulz and Brandi Passante. When their relationship ended, Brandi spoke openly about her experiences, while Jarrod seemed to vanish almost completely from public view. Then came the arrest, headlines, accusations, and years of unanswered questions. The more Brandi revealed, the quieter Jarrod became. Now, at 48, many fans are asking the same question. Was there more to the story than the public ever heard? And what does Jarrod Schulz's refusal to speak actually reveal about Brandi Passante and their relationship? Join us as we uncover what Jarrod Schulz revealed about Brandi Passante before Storage Wars made them famous. Long before they ever caught the attention of millions of viewers, Jarrod Schulz and Brandi Passante were simply two young people trying to build a life for themselves in Southern California. Their story did not begin on television. It began years before the cameras arrived, before the auctions, and before either of them became recognizable faces to reality TV audiences across America. The two met in 1999 while working at the same carpet cleaning company. At the time, neither one had any connection to the entertainment industry. They were not chasing fame, building a brand, or planning a television career. They were working ordinary jobs and trying to make ends meet like countless other couples. Over time, their relationship became more than just work colleagues. They fell in love and built a life together, welcomed two children, Cameron and Peyton, and started focusing on creating a future that could provide stability for their family. At a glance, it looked like a familiar American story of two hard-working people trying to turn opportunities into something lasting. For Jarrod, that opportunity eventually came from an unlikely place. He had developed an interest in storage auctions, fascinated by the idea that abandoned units could contain hidden value. What began as curiosity slowly turned into a business. Jarrod started purchasing abandoned storage units and reselling the contents through a thrift store called Now and Then. The business became a family operation, as Brandi was heavily involved in running the store, organizing inventory, helping customers, and managing many of the day-to-day responsibilities that kept everything functioning. The arrangement appeared to work. Jarrod focused on finding merchandise, while Brandi helped turn those discoveries into sales. Looking back, it is easy to see why television producers found them interesting. They were different personalities trying to achieve the same goal. Jarrod was impulsive, willing to gamble on opportunities that others might avoid, while Brandi was practical, often questioning whether his risks made financial sense. Together, they created a natural contrast that would later become one of the defining dynamics of Storage Wars. But at the time, there were no cameras to document their disagreements or celebrate their successes. What makes this period of their story so important is that it reveals something many viewers would later forget. Before they became television personalities, they were partners. They built their lives together long before anyone was watching. And when fame eventually arrived, it did not create their relationship. It simply placed that relationship under a spotlight powerful enough to expose every crack that had already begun to form. Because once Storage Wars entered the picture, the version of Jarrod and Brandi that audiences thought they knew would quickly become very different from the reality behind closed doors. The relationship viewers thought they understood. When Storage Wars premiered in 2010, Jarrod Schulz and Brandi Passante immediately stood out from the rest of the cast. While many of the other buyers were older, more experienced, and already established within the auction world, Jarrod and Brandi represented something different. They were younger, still trying to grow their business, and often seemed to be figuring things out as they went. Producers quickly leaned into that image, branding them as the young guns. It worked. Viewers connected with them almost instantly. Part of the appeal came from how different they appeared. Their arguments became one of the most recognizable parts of the show. At first, audiences viewed the bickering as harmless entertainment. They looked like a couple balancing each other out. Jarrod pushed forward. Brandi pulled him back. Together, they created the kind of chemistry reality television producers dream about. But there was something many viewers never realized. The show often presented them as husband and wife, yet they were never legally married. For years, countless fans assumed they were a married couple because that was the impression the series created. In reality, they were long-term partners raising children together and running businesses together. But no wedding had ever taken place. That detail may seem minor, but it revealed something important about reality television itself. The version of Jarrod and Brandi that appeared on screen was not always the complete version. What viewers saw was a carefully edited story designed to entertain millions of people every week. Meanwhile, real life continued in the background. As their popularity increased, so did the pressure. The success of Storage Wars brought attention, opportunities, and larger expectations. The couple expanded their thrift store business and opened a second location in Long Beach. Logically, it appeared to be the next milestone toward a retail empire, but the reality was far less glamorous. The new location struggled financially almost from the beginning. Despite the exposure generated by the show, profits never arrived the way they had hoped. Eventually, the store closed. Not long after, their original location would also shut its doors. While viewers watched Jarrod and Brandi celebrate big auction finds on television, many of the businesses connected to those purchases were facing serious challenges behind the scenes. On screen, they looked successful, but off-screen, they were dealing with the same pressures that destroy countless partnerships: financial stress, family responsibilities, and the demands of working together every single day. The audience only saw fragments of those struggles. What they didn't know was that the relationship they had spent years watching was becoming increasingly fragile. The arguments that once seemed entertaining were happening against a backdrop of difficulties that cameras could never fully capture. And by the time viewers were laughing at another disagreement between the young guns, a much bigger change had already begun unfolding behind the scenes. The breakup nobody knew had already happened. One of the strangest things about the end of Jarrod Schulz and Brandi Passante's relationship is that, for a long time, almost nobody knew it had happened. While millions of viewers continued to watch reruns, follow Storage Wars updates, and assume the couple was still together, the reality was very different. Their relationship had already come to an end. According to Brandi, the split happened after the filming of Season 12, which aired in 2018, yet the public would not learn about it until years later. There was no dramatic announcement, no emotional social media post, and no public statement explaining what had happened. Instead, the breakup remained private, and in hindsight, that silence may have been the first clue that their separation was far more complicated than fans realized. For years, Jarrod and Brandi had built a public identity together. Their businesses were connected, their television careers were connected, even their reputation within the Storage Wars franchise revolved around them functioning as a team. Untangling all of that was never going to be simple. So while viewers continued associating them as a couple, they were already living separate lives away from the cameras. The truth only became widely known during the Season 13 premiere of Storage Wars in 2021. For the first time, Brandi openly addressed the situation. She explained that she and Jarrod were no longer together and revealed that they had been separated for quite some time. To many viewers, the announcement came as a shock. Some fans had suspected problems. Others had noticed subtle changes in their interactions. But very few understood how long the relationship had actually been over. What made the revelation even more surprising was what Brandi said next. She described herself as having been essentially a single mother for years. According to her, much of the responsibility for raising their children had fallen on her shoulders, both before and after the official breakup. It was a statement that immediately changed how many viewers viewed the relationship they thought they understood. Suddenly, the playful arguments and sarcastic exchanges from Storage Wars looked different through a new lens. Fans began revisiting old episodes, wondering whether signs of deeper problems had been visible all along. Had the tension been real? Were some of those disagreements less about entertainment and more about frustrations that had been building for years? No one outside the relationship could answer those questions with certainty. But one thing had become clear. The story audiences had followed for more than a decade was missing important chapters. At the same time, Jarrod's response to the breakup remained surprisingly limited. Contrary to many reality television breakups that unfold publicly through interviews, social media posts, and competing narratives, Jarrod said very little. He acknowledged the separation on the show, but beyond that, he largely avoided discussing the details. That silence created a vacuum, and whenever there is a vacuum, speculation rushes in to fill it. Fans wanted explanations. They wanted answers. They wanted to know what had happened between two people who had spent so many years building a life together. But before those questions could be answered, an incident away from the cameras would completely transform the public conversation surrounding both of them. And after that moment, everything changed. The incident that changed everything. When Brandi Passante publicly confirmed that her relationship with Jarrod Schulz had ended, most fans assumed that would be the biggest surprise of the story. They were wrong, because only days after viewers learned that the longtime couple had been separated for years, an incident occurred that would completely overshadow the breakup itself and permanently alter how many people viewed Jarrod. On April 30th, 2021, Brandi was spending time with friends at a bar in Lake Forest, California. According to reports that later emerged, Jarrod arrived at the same location. What happened next quickly became the center of national entertainment headlines. An argument broke out between the former couple. Witness accounts claimed the confrontation became heated. According to law enforcement sources cited by multiple media outlets, Brandi asked Jarrod to leave. The situation continued to escalate, and allegations later surfaced that Jarrod had shoved her during the dispute. By the time police arrived, he was no longer at the scene. What might have remained a private disagreement suddenly became a public legal matter. Days later, authorities questioned Jarrod about the incident. He denied physically touching Brandi, but investigators continued reviewing the case, and eventually, the Orange County District Attorney's Office filed a misdemeanor domestic violence battery charge against him. The news spread quickly. For years, audiences had watched Jarrod as one half of one of Storage Wars' most recognizable duos. Now his name was appearing in headlines for entirely different reasons. The timing made the situation even more explosive. Fans had only just learned that Jarrod and Brandi were no longer together. Before many could process that revelation, they were confronted with a legal case involving the same two people they had spent years watching on television. As expected, public reaction was immediate. Online discussions exploded. Viewers debated what had happened, took sides, analyzed old episodes, and searched for clues that might explain how things had reached this point. But beyond the headlines and speculation, there was another consequence unfolding quietly in the background. Storage Wars began moving forward without Jarrod. Although no dramatic public announcement was made explaining his departure, his role within the franchise effectively came to an end. While Brandi continued appearing on the show, Jarrod gradually disappeared from the cast. The network never needed to explain much, as the casting decisions spoke for themselves. For someone who had spent more than a decade building a television career, the change was dramatic. One moment, he was a familiar face appearing in front of millions of viewers. The next, he was largely absent from the franchise that had made him famous. Yet what happened afterward may have been even more surprising than the incident itself. In situations like this, public figures often rush to defend themselves. They give interviews, they release statements, they share their side of the story. Jarrod did none of those things. Instead, he seemed to retreat from public life almost entirely. And as the months turned into years, that silence became one of the most fascinating parts of the entire story. Because while Jarrod was saying almost nothing, Brandi was beginning to speak more openly than ever before. And what she revealed would leave fans with even more questions than answers. Brandi told her story. Jarrod never told his. After the events of 2021, something unusual happened. The public did not receive two competing versions of the story. Brandi Passante continued speaking openly about her life, her experiences, and the journey she had been on since the end of her relationship with Jarrod Schulz. Jarrod, meanwhile, became increasingly difficult to find. For years, fans had watched them together. Now, only one of them seemed willing to discuss what had happened. Through interviews, podcasts, and online appearances, Brandi gradually revealed details about a chapter of her life that she had spent years keeping private. She spoke about rediscovering herself. She spoke about independence. And most importantly, she spoke about finally feeling free. One of the statements that attracted the most attention came when she explained that she had not really been allowed to have her own identity for many years. It was a comment that immediately sparked discussion among fans who had followed the couple since the earliest days of Storage Wars. People wanted to know what she meant. Were there struggles viewers never saw? Had the relationship been more difficult than it appeared on television? Or was she simply describing the challenge of spending years being known as one half of a famous reality TV couple? Brandi never tried to turn her story into a sensational public battle. Instead, she focused on discussing her own growth and recovery. She described learning who she was outside the relationship, learning how to make decisions independently, and building a life that was no longer tied to a shared public image. One of the most symbolic examples of that new chapter came in the form of a small tattoo. The design featured the word "free" alongside a bird. She explained that it represented freedom, healing, and moving forward. To many fans, it became one of the clearest signs of how dramatically her life had changed since the breakup. But while Brandi was sharing these experiences, something equally interesting was happening on the other side of the story. Jarrod remained completely silent. He stopped giving interviews or discussing the relationship publicly. He never responded to any speculation, and even his social media activity became increasingly rare. The contrast was impossible to ignore. One person was openly discussing the process of rebuilding their life. The other seemed determined to disappear from the conversation entirely. Naturally, fans began drawing their own conclusions. Some believed the silence was intentional legal advice, while others thought it reflected regret. Some viewed it as an attempt to move forward privately, yet others interpreted it as confirmation of Brandi's version of events. The truth is that nobody outside Jarrod himself knows exactly why he chose that path. What makes the situation so fascinating is that public figures rarely remain silent for this long, especially when their reputations, careers, and personal histories are being discussed so openly. Yet, year after year, Jarrod continued saying almost nothing. He made no attempts to dismantle Brandi's account of her experiences. The longer Jarrod remained silent, the more people began searching for meaning in that silence. And eventually, fans started asking a completely different question. What if the truth about Brandi wasn't hidden in something Jarrod said, but in the fact that he never said anything at all? What Jarrod's silence really says about Brandi. For years, fans have searched for the moment when Jarrod Schulz would finally tell his side of the story. They expected an interview, a podcast appearance, or even a social media statement. Something that would explain what happened, challenge the public narrative, or reveal details that had remained hidden for years. But that moment never came. And as time passed, many people began looking at the situation differently. Perhaps the biggest revelation was not waiting somewhere in the future, or perhaps it had already happened. Because while Brandi Passante continued moving forward publicly, Jarrod made a very different choice. The significance of that decision depends entirely on how you interpret it. Some believe it reflects legal caution, while others think it represents someone who simply no longer wants his private life debated in public. Whatever the reason, the result has remained the same. For years, Brandi's perspective has been the only detailed account available to the public. And remarkably, Jarrod has never launched a public campaign to discredit it. He has never gone on television to attack her character. He has never published lengthy responses addressing every claim. He has never tried to turn public opinion against her. Brandi remained visible as she continued appearing on Storage Wars. She built a new chapter of her life in front of an audience that had supported her for years. She openly discussed healing, independence, and personal growth. Fans watched her evolve beyond the role she had occupied for more than a decade. But Jarrod chose the opposite direction. He stepped away completely from reality television and focused on his business ventures. He largely disappeared from the public conversation that once revolved around him. Because the truth many viewers expected was never some shocking confession, a hidden recording, a secret document, or an explosive revelation waiting to be uncovered. The reality is that no one outside Jarrod and Brandi knows every detail of what happened in their relationship. What the public has are fragments, interviews, legal records, television appearances, and years of speculation. And like many relationships that end badly, two people can walk away with very different experiences of the same story. Do you think Jarrod's silence was the right decision after everything that happened? And if he finally agreed to an interview tomorrow, do you think it would change how fans view Brandi Passante? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.